brought to you by Oba Consult. We are a process management, improvement, food manufacturing, food safety, and quality management consultants. Yes, and we have a rich flora of consultants across the industry with various qualifications who work with us. So yeah, we are assured of quality service all the time. So our main activities and services include public technical engagements, where we engage schools and other industries, yes, in improving their processes as far as food safety and quality management is concerned. We also do quality and food safety management systems formulation, implementation, and continuous management. We also offer trainings, first and second party audits. We do low acid canned foods, thermal process establishment and validations, food safety compliance management, and process efficiency management and improvement, among others. Okay, so this afternoon we have resource persons with us, and they're in the persons of Jemila Boye-Okit and Jacob Tetteh Ayin. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and introduce them and then we can zoom in. Thank you. So Jemila is a food safety and quality professional with over 20 years of experience across the business-to-business, fast-moving consumer goods and service sectors. She currently serves as the Global Supplier Risk and Performance Lead at the Barry Callebaut Group, where she leads strategic compliance programs across Europe, the Americas, EMEA regions. Her expertise spans risk management, integrated food safety, quality, regulatory, systems, audit program development, and global project delivery. Jemila holds multiple certifications, including lead auditor in FSSC 22000, BRC Global Standards, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, Preventive Control Qualified Individual, and Prince 2 Agile. She successfully delivered third-party and scientific and specific customer certifications across multiple business units and played key roles in M&A quality transitions. With a strong background in coaching high-performing teams and steering data-driven decision-making, she's passionate about STEM education and is a pioneering member of the KNUST College of Engineering Alumni Mentorship Program. She holds an executive MBA in finance, a BSc in chemical engineering, and an advanced certificate in quality management. Jemila Boye-Okit, you are welcome to today's session, and thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this session this afternoon. Okay, our next resource person is Mr. Jacob Ayin. He is a member of the Chartered Quality Institute with over 20 years of experience in the FMCG industry. Jacob has formulated, established, and managed systems certified to various standards such as ISO 9001, FSSC 22000, ISO 14000, ISO 45001, BRC, IFS, and specific customer and market standards. He holds certificates for lead auditor for several standards and has guided several organizations in Africa, Europe, and the USA to certification or compliance through training, systems establishment, coaching, and audits. Jacob is currently the Director of Quality Assurance and Thermal Process of Thai Union Europe. He is also a managing partner of Oba Consult Limited. A member of the Institute of Thermal Processing Specialists, Jacob holds a BSc certificate in food science and executive MBA in finance. Thank you, Jacob, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah, so we would like to quickly zoom into today's forum. That's the main reason why we are all here this afternoon. So we'll start with this question. Would all like to know what the concepts of change management is in your experiences and why it's critical in manufacturing environments where food safety and product integrity are involved. Throwing this to either of our consultants, this morning to start with the session. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I could start off. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so Joanna, can you hear me okay?
I
can hear you, Jacob.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So maybe I could just give it a start and then maybe Jamie can take it off. So when we talk about change, I'm expecting that maybe the people on here are involved in manufacturing because we are talking specifically within the scope of or the context of manufacturing. However, the change could be anything. I mean, you could be running a shop or you could be in an office. And as we know, I mean, as the English word suggests, okay, we're talking about change. So you have a system that is in a certain state, and usually we would expect that it's in a stable state. Everything is working okay. And then you decide that you want to tweak or you want to replace something, you want to eliminate something, you want to add something. These would be the context of change we're talking about. And I would just like to show a small video. You can still see the screen, right? Joanna, you see the screen?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. So this is just a small illustration just to give you an idea of what we talk about when we talk about change, and then also the impacts of change on your system, on your shop, on your production line, or whatever it is, just to give you a bit of context. Okay, so this, as you see, is a simple Jenga game. Okay, I mean, those of us who know, and it is like bars or cubes that have been arranged. And currently, we are in a very stable situation, okay? Your system, your manufacturing line, your production line is in a stable status. Stable, no changes, okay? And then at this point, you would notice that there is a change here. That change might be that you have taken out somebody, a personnel from the line. You might have changed or you might have removed a conveyor belt. You might have removed a sensor from the line. There is a change, okay? Immediately you have that the stability of your system is not the same. If we say that the stability of the system is not the same, it doesn't mean that the system has collapsed. The system is still running, but there has been a change that has changed the stability of your process, okay? And then here, you have another situation that is actually happening. You see that this cube here has been drawn out because you are going to change that machine. You're going to replace it like for like. But now look at what happens with that like. It is the same kind of machine. It might be the same specification. However, even the orientation is completely changed. This orientation is changed. So in your mind, you might think, okay, well, but I just replaced like for like, and because of that, it's supposed to be the same. But this illustration tells you that it is not the same anymore because the stability of the system then has also changed again. So you would see from the illustration now, the system is not as stable as we talk about. So this illustration basically is just to give us a kind of a foundation of what we are going to talk about. We're going to be talking about, when we talk about change, it could be eliminating something from your system, adding something to your system, replacing something like for like, or substituting something in your system. And as we talk, as we are talking about, it's mainly in the context of manufacturing, but you can even think about even your home or whatever it is activity you are involved in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Anything more to add, Jemila?
Yeah, I think that was thank you very much, Joanna, for having me on this forum. Jacob, you gave a very good illustration. So even without collapsing the system, you can see that slight changes can rock the system and put your whole company or business or process at risk. So what I would like to add is that change, as we know it, is inevitable. As long as the world rotates on its axis, change is inevitable. There will be morning, there will be evening. So in the same way, whatever process you have, what we know for sure, we can guarantee is that change will happen. So the change happening is not the issue, but how you manage that change is what matters. So it's very important that when you have a process that needs to change, first of all, if you know that it needs to change, that's already a step ahead, because that means then that you can plan it, you can structure it to have as little impact as possible on your operational processes. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add on.
Okay, thank you, Jemila. I'd like to remind you all and to encourage you to post any questions that you may have in the chat, which will be addressed later in the course of the discussion. Thank you. Okay. I'd also like to know what the connection is between effective change management and food safety outcomes. Is there any important connection? How is the relationship like? To any of you?
Okay, I can take this one. So I think there's a direct correlation, because if we take manufacturing industry and particularly food manufacturing industry, most often the process is designed for a specific product or specific outcome. So if you change anything in that process, then it means that you have a risk that your product your specification may not be what you intended it to be, or the quality will be impacted, or regulatory requirements may not be met. So I would say there's a direct correlation between change and impact on food safety. If the change is managed properly, it's managed in a controlled way, then you would minimize the impact on food safety. But if it's not managed properly, or if you don't structure it, if you don't communicate about the change, then you run the risk of negatively impacting food safety. Most of the time, the intention of the change will be to bring an improvement, because I don't think anybody sets out to make a change to make things worse. So the change could have different desired outcomes. Could be to improve profits, could be to improve effectiveness in the process, could be to improve requirements compliance, be it regulatory or specifications. So these need to be managed properly to make sure that the desired effect is had and it does not adversely impact on food safety. Jacob, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just a bit. I mean, yes, definitely. I mean, the when you set up a manufacturing process, and then you have a system in place for food safety, it will mean definitely then that your system was based on a certain context, right? The context is the kind of personnel you have, the kind of equipment you have, the kind of environment in which you are processing. So, for instance, if you establish your HACCP system, your HACCP would have a scope, right? And then it will have a context. All of these conditions are the ones that you use to establish the safe production of your product, right? Therefore, If any of them change, just like the Jenga illustration we said, just one bit of it changing, then would definitely could have an impact on your final product safety. It could have an impact on the system's result, right? Therefore, definitely there is always this correlation. If just in case, okay, we might be thinking about what kind of thing these guys are talking about. Maybe let's give ourselves the example of, okay, I like thermal process. Okay, so I'm in thermal process. Okay. Now imagine that you have a boiler. The boiler has a capacity of, let's say, a 10-ton steam, and then you are using this to basically sterilize your product. Then management comes up with a brilliant idea of saying that, okay, look, energy cost is very high. Because of that, we want to reduce the energy cost. So we go for a boiler of 5 tons. That 5-ton boiler will not be able to heat your product as fast as the 10-ton boiler. Therefore, you need to understand that in the safety of your product, in the safety of your sterilization, you need to be able to validate that change to make sure that maybe you have to heat differently to gain the same safe result. Okay, so that change in the process will definitely or most likely will have an impact on the safety of your product, and you need to know about it.
Okay, thank you so much, Jake. Someone may say that my industry is audited very regularly, and it looks like everything is working okay. Is there any way food safety can be compromised in such situations? Could you explain how it could be impacted negatively, even though the industry is well audited and in good standing? Yeah,
Jimmy, you're the one who goes around auditing, right?
Jacob.
That's okay. I can pick this one up. So, yeah, the purpose of an audit is first of all to confirm compliance. And then secondly, whilst confirming compliance, you may come up with a number of gaps, which sometimes we call non-conformances or non-compliances. So the gaps there give you information about your system. And then what happens thereafter? To be able to come back to compliance, you need to fix those gaps. So action. So even if you have a well audited system, it just means that your system has been thoroughly looked into and there are a series of actions potentially that you need to take. So if you don't take those actions to make sure that your system is always under control, it could be a compromised system. So just having a well audited, system or process does not mean that you are immune to negative impacts of change. Yeah. And also, as Jacob said earlier, it's within a certain context, right? A certain scope. So if you're producing, let's take, for example, a chocolate, it's within a certain set of rules. You have a specific recipe, you have a specific processing, on the line. You have temperatures that are fixed, you have volumes or throughput that is fixed. So yeah, if even in a well audited system, if you change anything that impacts those recipes, the processing temperatures, like Jacob illustrated, yeah, you could still have a negative impact. So, yeah, an audit is serving just one purpose: to confirm your compliance, but also to give you actionable points. And then, some of the actions that you need to take maybe to change something. So if, for example, during the audit it's identified that there are deviations on your finished product specification, it means you need to look into it, look into your root causes. Why is this happening? And out of that, once you determine what the root causes are, you would be able to define specific actions. And in taking those actions, that's where you need to control that kind of change. By structuring it, by communicating it clearly, by monitoring and measuring every single significant change that you make, and then of course validating to make sure that whatever change you are making will not have a negative impact but will achieve the desired results. So yes, to answer your question, even in a well audited environment or process, you can still have changes that are not controlled go haywire.
Yeah, I'll just add 2 points. Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll add these 2 points to it. First of all, usually when you are in a system that is audited, the auditors will always tell you it's a sampling activity. Audit doesn't mean the auditor doesn't live with you every single moment of your production. The auditor comes, and a lot of times, systems where when the auditor is coming, everybody dresses up nicely, right? I mean, so what the auditor is going to find is based on a sampling activity. Therefore, there are things that could be missed during a 2-day or 5-day audit. Okay. So the fact that maybe you might have changed something, the auditor might not have picked it during the audit. That's the first thing. The second thing is audits are also periodic. So imagine that the audit is even every 6 months or every 1 year. It means that if you made a change, the possibility that the auditor could find that change and be able to raise that non-conformity or the gap that Jamie talked about is six months. Imagine now that you are producing on a line that is producing even 100 units per minute. Multiply that by the number of hours you're working and multiply that by 6 months before the auditor comes. That is a lot of unsafe products that you are going to be releasing into the market. So audits is not enough. You should know your system and you are responsible for production of a safe product. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacob. We would like to unpack the types of changes that hit the industry the hardest. Them. So I'll pose this question to Jemila. Yes. How do raw material substitutions or supplier-related changes impact food quality or compliance downstream?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
No, let me take the question. How do raw material
Okay.
substitutions or complier transitions, yes, affect risk exposure in the supply chain? How do they affect risk exposure in the supply chain?
Thanks for the question. So raw materials, as you may know, could be sourced from different origins. And by origins, it could be different types of the raw material, could be different countries, could be different sources. So your formulation or your recipe may be based on a specific kind of specification for the raw material. So by changing the raw material, you're exposing your process or your product to the risk of what inconsistency. Typically, a good specification could be within a certain range. You have a minimum and a maximum of a certain parameter. If you take, for example, let's say fat content or sugar content of a certain raw ingredient, and based on that, you make your formulation. So by changing the source of the raw material without looking at the specification, then you could have that particular ingredient being out of spec, and hence it will affect your final product because your recipe remains the same, right? But the source of your raw material changes. Another thing is that some raw materials are susceptible to fraud in the marketplace. So, for example, we often hear that there is more volume of olive oil in the market than there is the farming or production of. So it means that there's some augmentation or substitution, adulteration somewhere. So if you change your ingredient to an origin which is risky or prone to food fraud, then you also have the risk of introducing elements which are not part of the ingredient. So if you take olive oil, you expect it to be 100% olive oil, but then if it's been adulterated for illustration purposes with palm oil, for example, refined seed oil, then it means that your formulation may not be the same. It could affect the food safety or it could affect the quality. And so in some cases, it can even affect the regulatory compliance. So that could be it. And then also you have different suppliers. If even the ingredient is the same, you may have different suppliers and different ways of producing that same ingredient. So that also could bring in some risks into your process.
Okay, thank you. This is a follow-up question. Are there any signals that will help us detect how these changes could impact food safety and quality downstream? Are there any signals to look out for?
Yes, I would say so. If I take, for example, just the raw materials, typically in your own process to have control, it's good practice to define your specification. When you are buying the raw materials, what are you looking out for? What parameters are important and will affect the performance, of your process or of your product? So you need to define that specifications, and then in a good environment, you would have approval of those suppliers, which means that you would have some minimum requirements to be able to supply to your factory. So once you have those criteria set, then if you're making a change, for example, moving to a new supplier who is not on the list of approved suppliers, it means then that you would have to take them through the approval process. So if you do not do this, then you know already that you are introducing a risk because you don't know whether that supplier has good manufacturing practices, whether they are able to meet the specifications, and so on. Some companies will set minimum requirements. For example, I want all my food ingredient suppliers to be GFSI certified, which means they should have a certain food safety certification. Could be FSSC 22000, could be IFS, or could be BRC, or any of those certifications. By setting those kind of standards, it means that you have a certain minimum, you know that they comply to a certain minimum level of food safety. So that gives assurance. So once you go out for a supplier who does not have this kind of certification, you know that you are getting into risky business. So that could be an indication that you may go out of control. And then if also you look on the marketplace, sometimes if you're going out for these new suppliers, you may want to scan, horizon scanning, we call it, just to see in the in industry, in the rapid alert system, are they prone to recalls? Have they had any major incidents? Have consumers or other companies, complained about them? If you can find this kind of information, that can also give you an indication whether it's good to go with that change to that supplier, or you need to do some further due diligence. These are just some examples. Jacob, do you have something more to add?
Well, I mean, indicators, I think that an example, for instance, of what Jamie was talking about, and then I have been involved here, where you have a company that you use kind of thickness. Okay, so when we say maybe emulsifiers or thickness, so you use a kind of a starch. A company that purchases the starch from a certain country, certain continent, and then again, because management thinks, okay, maybe we could save a bit of money because another potential supplier has come and said that, oh, okay, I mean, I have starch to be able to sell to you, and because of that, we move, right? And like Jimmy said, we don't do all of the risk assessment, only for them to realize that the starch doesn't thicken in the same way as the previous one. So in the mind of the R&D guys, in the mind of the procurement guys, it is starch. However, when you start production and you realize that, okay, the starch is not thickening fast enough, then what happens on the production floor is that, okay, maybe just add more. Immediately you do that, you have gotten the indication that your starch is not thickening as it used to, but then somebody on the production floor has the brilliant idea to say, okay, then add more. So we add more. So then what is happening is that we are changing the specification or the recipe of the product because the content is no more the same. When they get into thermal process, okay, you are also trying to heat, and because you've put more starch, now the product is not heating as fast as it was heating before when you had the previous starch. And now at the end of your process, your product has not been sterilized correctly. Your microorganisms are surviving, and because of that, you have unsafe products on the market. Okay, so just an example, okay, to be able to tell you what kind of indicators you could be looking at.
Okay, Jacob. Thank you for the insightful information. I'd like us to move to labeling and packaging and general packaging. And this is directed to Jacob. Yes. So how do packaging updates and labeling changes influence allergen control, traceability, and general consumer safety?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, Jacob.
Thank you very much.
How do changes in labeling and packaging? Yeah.
Okay. This is an interesting one, and well, I'm happy to deal with it because if we look on the European market, because I operate a lot more on the European market. If you look at the European market and even in the US, one of the leading causes of product recalls is actually wrong packaging, wrong labeling or allergen related labeling issues. What basically it means is that, okay, there are a lot of regulations regarding the labeling of product and the information to put on product. And not just information, and even the mode of the information, where to put what information, the font size, the contrast of your font versus what your background is. Still, there's a lot regulations on this. Now, a lot of companies are caught in this. You are moving from paper label to, let's say, printed can. That is a change. And there are considerations that you need to make according to regulation to change from the paper to the printed can. You are also changing, or R&D comes up with a brilliant idea of changing an ingredient in the product. That ingredient, the concentration of the active ingredient in there might not be exactly the same. I give an example. You have a product that has pasta in there. There are some pasta that have egg as part of the pasta, and there are some pasta that don't have egg. Now you have a label, and then again you are changing the supplier of the pasta, or even the current supplier comes to you and says that, okay, I have this new pasta. It absorbs water faster, or it hydrates faster, and because of that we move to that. Now, when you move to that, you are supposed to check the specification of that pasta to make sure that now you have a new allergen in your product. So the previous one didn't have egg. You did not put egg as an allergen on your label, but now suddenly you have an allergen. So if you are making that change, then you need to make sure that now you are declaring the egg as an allergen in your product. Secondly, like you say, okay, we're changing some information on the label. Usually companies will have very rigorous procedure for approving labels before you use the labels, because that information is what you are giving to the consumer. So if you miss some information, or you do not put the information correctly on the label, again, example, in Europe, when you have a component of your product that contains the allergen on the label, is supposed to be bolded. Just not boldening that component in the product on the label could lead you into a recall. It means that the vulnerable group in the community, or the vulnerable consumers, might not notice that the product, because the label is not properly designed, might not notice that the product is not safe for them. If I am allergic to egg, you need to give me the good opportunity to catch that there is egg in this product. So maybe you're making that change of the label. All these considerations are not made, and because of that, you end up in a situation where your product actually could be safe for the general population, but because that is not properly done, you are against regulation, and then also there is a small vulnerable group in the population that is at risk, and because of that, you have to recall your product. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. I'm sure we are learning a lot. So far, I have learned that every change in the process, no matter how minute or unimportant they may seem, can affect the safety and quality of our process and products in the long run. Yeah, so thank you for all of that information. Jacob, I also like to know from your interactions with personnel and their trainings, are there any aspects of workforce changes that could also deeply impact food safety on the production floor?
Absolutely. I think that in food safety management, we always recognize the importance of workforce, competent workforce. Again, in today's world where companies are really cutting costs because obviously business outlook or business environment is very challenging, sometimes we make some changes like moving people about or moving people from one place to the other. Sometimes we say that, okay, this job is being done by 3 people, but then now we can do it with only 2 people. We take out someone, or sometimes people are leaving, and because of that, but then the machine has to be run, and therefore we quickly employ a new person and bring the person in. Now, when we're doing this, there are a lot of implications because the new person we are bringing might not be as competent as the person who left, right? And then also, if we reduce from 2 people, these 2 people, the attention to detail, as we had before, is not the same. It means that these 2 people would have to stretch themselves a bit more to pay attention to those temperature limits, those time limits in your food safety management system, right? And then also sometimes we are making a general business change for whatever reason, for cost cutting, for process improvement. This is where human resource management is very important, where communication is very critical. People need to understand why things are being done and what is their responsibility. If the people who are involved in the process are not able to relate to those changes, or even the changes among themselves in terms of personnel, then they might not be able to recognize their responsibility to make sure that the system remains in a balanced state. And like for those of us who were here from the beginning, the balance or the stable state of the system is very critical. So if we are changing people or things are being changed around people, and the people are not able to understand and buy into it and understand their responsibility to maintain or retain the stability of the system, then that is when you begin to have a problem. Okay. It could actually be even increasing, bringing more people. So you have a situation where 2 people are doing the job, and then we bring in 3 more people. Those 3 more people, if they are not properly trained or they are not competent enough, even though now you have more people, more resource, those guys will be making mistakes that eventually is going to end up in unsafe products.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. So we'd like to move from the changes and their effects to the best practices and strategies that we need to apply or employ to prevent all these unfortunate situations that could arise. And so, Jacob, could you walk us through how HACCP as well as other risk assessments should be applied during change management processes?
Yes, okay, so HACCP, okay, again, HACCP is hazard analysis and critical control points. When we are making a change in our process, so in the HACCP principles itself, there is towards the end of the process, there is a place where we always say you establish your HACCP system. You did your risk assessment based on a set of conditions. What is the temperature? What is the time? Who are doing the job? those are the set of parameters that you establish your HACCP system on. Now, when you have a change, and part of your change management process, you need to ask yourself the question as part of the risk assessment: has this or is this change going to make any difference in the conditions, set of conditions upon which we establish the HACCP system, right? If the answer is yes, it means that you have to go back to your HACCP system and do your hazard identification, or maybe you have to go all the way to the preliminary stages where you even define your product, okay? Because remember that in the preliminary steps, one of the steps is defining your product. We've talked about some of the examples of starch or whatever it is. The definition of your product might change. When I'm running HACCP trainings, I always use the analogy of describing your missing child at trade fair. For those of many years ago who used to go to trade fair, every time there is an announcement of a missing child, right? Or a found child who cannot find the parents. And then I'll say, when you go to that announcement desk and then you say that your child is missing, they will ask you some questions. How well can you describe the child such that anybody who sees the child will be able to say, okay, this is the child, right? If the child is wearing a jeans trousers and you say that the child is wearing a jeans trousers, it's not enough, because jeans could be blue or it could be brown, right? So when you have all of that, all of those, then you'll be able to do your risk assessment of your product correctly. So if it is a jeans trousers, you've identified it as a jeans trousers, and then tomorrow you are changing it from a blue to brown, you have to ask yourself, have the conditions changed? Conditions for risk for the product, have they changed? If they have, then it means that you have to go back to your HACCP and redo your HACCP, or that part of the HACCP. And redoing it might mean that you have to write new procedures. You need to identify or establish new critical limits to make sure that your product continues to be safe.
Jemila, anything to add, please?
Yeah, I think Jacob has explained it very well. So obviously, once you have established your HACCP, program or plan, validation and verification are part of it. So you also need to check whether the changes that you are going to make will be able to meet those critical control points that were set. Otherwise, you may have to probably change those critical control points, or change the processing parameters to, or change further the ingredients or some part of the process to be able to arrive at those same set critical control points. So I think validation is also important. Validation is asking the question, will it work? The changes that you are going to make, will it work to achieve the same product safety? And verification is having systems in place to check periodically through monitoring that it is actually working. So it's important to tie these ones in also to your change control before you actually implement the change.
Okay, thank you, Jamila. On the note of verification and validation, we know that one of the major changes in the production industry is the introduction of a new process line. So, Jacob, would like to know what the non-negotiables are when it comes to validation and verification of these new process lines before upscaling them.
Okay. Okay, so changes in production line. I think that Jamie then mentioned the validation. The question you're asking yourself is, can it do the job? And so if we asking, can it do the job? Maybe the first question is, what job do you want that change to, or what production line, what job do you want the production line to do, right? I had a bad experience where we decided at some point to change a machine in a continuous production line. the continuous production line has a certain cadence. So it means that there is a certain speed that all the machines have been programmed to run. And so that it runs smoothly, all of them are in sync. Then this new equipment we decided to put in there, unfortunately, had a different cadence. Nobody noticed it. So what happened was that machine was running slower and it could not be made faster than what it was. I mean, the limit, right? So then what happened is that every time the lines that were upstream or the equipment that are upstream had to continuously be stopping every, whatever, 10 minutes or 5 minutes, they had to stop because this new equipment we put in there is not able to match the speed of the line upstream. Downstream, it also meant that the equipment were beginning to sit idle. And for process improvement guys, you know that your operational efficiency or operational utilization of your equipment is part of the cost management of your plant. So it means that then just that change that was not managed properly, then what happened was that you are now, even though you had a good intention, like Jamie said from the beginning, now basically it's costing you money, right? When you putting an equipment in, you always, for me, what I would, the guidance would be, what is the current state of your processing system, processing line? What work do you want this new change to do? What are the possible impacts, negative impacts of this change? Would you be able to mitigate them to make sure that they do not make you worse off? If you can, then it means that whatever actions you need to put in place would have to retain the stability of your line or improve the stability of your line. If it cannot maintain or improve it, then the answer, if you ask me as a consultant or anybody, the answer will be, don't make that change. Irrespective of what anybody is telling you, don't make that change because then you are going to be worse off than before.
Sorry, I was muted. Anything to add, Jemila?
I think Jacob explained it well. So,
Okay. Jemila, I would like to know how procurement and supplier facing teams can also help in managing changes through document traceability and change control, especially with regards to global vendor network.
yeah, that's a nice question. I had an experience before where even the same supplier, so the manufacturing plant had what we call inspection plan. So for a specific type of ingredient or raw material, when it arrives on the site, there are certain checks that are done on the documentation, on the certificate of analysis that is delivered with the product, and on taking samples to verify that it is indeed within spec. So based on historical data, it was determined that there's never any non-compliance with that particular ingredient or supplier. So let's change the inspection plan. No more sample taking and verification upon arrival. And then, unfortunately, that supplier delivered a product which was contaminated, ended up contaminating several batches in the plant. And this plant was producing semi-finished product delivered to other plants who were then delivering to other customers. So it became a global problem just by changing the inspection plan. So indeed, verifying documentation is a very important one for supplier controls. It also could be audits. So in good manufacturing practice, you will do your risk assessments as part of your hazard analysis. And then you determine which ingredients, for example, are high risk and consequently which suppliers of those ingredients are high risk. If you have, for example, nuts, let's take nuts as an example, hazelnuts. Turkey is one of the places which produces most nuts in the world, most hazelnuts. But you have other countries also which produce. You have Italy, you have Spain, You have next door to Turkey, you have Georgia. But typically, if you look on the horizon scanning, you see that Georgian nuts are prone to fraud or issues. So if you want for your premium products, some companies may say, yes, I want hazelnuts, but only from Turkey, not from Georgia. So perhaps if there is economic gain, maybe there are cheaper nuts in Georgia, or we have a shortage in Turkey, and you say, okay, it's available in Georgia. Let's just put it let's replace it on the line without doing your due diligence. This could impact negatively on your process. So auditing could be one such. Auditing is where you have classified that particular maybe material or process as high risk. So you want to send somebody to go and do a verification on site for you. As Jacob said in the beginning, an audit granted is a sampling exercise, right? So you tell your supplier, I'll be coming on such and such a day to look at this and that process. So any normal supplier would prepare the line. So it's a sampling activity, but still, if you have your criteria set right, you can still go in there and together with the supplier, you can identify opportunities for improvement, or you can confirm that the process, they have everything under control. So that's one of the due diligences that you can do. Traceability is very important when you do either a physical audit, or if even you don't do a physical audit by visiting the supplier. It's important for them to establish that from their own sourcing ingredients all the way up to the product that they deliver to you, that they can account for every single material that was used in the process. And by accounting, I mean a mass balance. So if you put in 10 tons, you want to know at the end of the day where those 10 tons went. If 70% went into the product and 30% went out as byproducts or waste, you should be able to trace this fully in the system. So traceability is very important. And what are some of the systems they put in place to guarantee traceability? For the bigger companies and so on, they may have some ERP systems, enterprise resource planning systems, right? So it means they are using digital systems to support them. So every ingredient that comes in is logged into the system. So they have an inventory, which you can see physically in the warehouse, but you can also see in the system. And whenever they take parts of that to produce, all the recipes are linked on this ERP systems, and they can see what has been consumed, what is still left, what was wasted, what was rejected. Everything is accounted for. So suppliers who have good ERP, it's also a plus. It makes it easier to make change because you can trace wherever something is missing or something doesn't add up. And that means that you are quick to find the problem and quick to, once you identify the problem, that's already halfway done, identifying the solution. So that's one thing. And then also the reputation of the supplier, for example, that could also be a win. If you know that the supplier, you have used them before, then you know them personally. Or if you have others in the industry who have used them, or if they're also part of, we mentioned earlier, the GFSI, they are GFSI certified. It means that they have subscribed themselves to a certain certification, and so you know that they are at a certain level. So all these things give extra assurance, um, that they have things under control. So when you're making those changes, these are some of the things that you look out for the supplier. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, your inspection plans. So it could be that you establish an inspection plan, it's working well. There are no incidents in history since you started receiving it. It's recommended to do a proper risk assessment. So to thoroughly look at all the deliveries that came, to look at the processes that they've been used for, to look at the results of your monitoring. And if you want to change the inspection plan, then it will be based on data, proper risk assessment. So that's again another set of documents that you can look at.
Okay, thank you very much, Jemila. Please, I would like to once again encourage all of us on the forum to ask questions. Any question bothering you or on your mind. We have limited questions and yes, for this presentation. But if you have anything outside of what we are discussing, any peculiar process or industry question that you want to ask, please feel free to post them in the chat. We'll be breaking for question time very soon, and then we'll address all the questions in the chat. If you want to speak to, you can just raise your hand up. You'll be called to ask your questions. Thank you. So I have a follow-up question for Jemila. How do you verify the competencies of new suppliers or suppliers who are transitioning? Yes, in the process. Is there any way to actually verify their trainings and competencies to minimize any issues after and even during the change process?
Yes, I think as part of the change, you would normally request for information about the supplier. So you have to set a certain minimum criteria that you want. So, for example, you may send them questionnaires. You may have raw material questionnaires or process-related questionnaires. So you send them a document with questions. Are you GFSI certified? Do you have specifications? What kind of prerequisite programs do you have? How do you control changes in your system? How do you release your products? So you can send them questionnaires asking all these questions, and you'll get valuable information back. So depending on the answers that they give, you can evaluate it and see whether the supplier is already at the level that you want them to be, or if they need development. So that's an example. When you do go on an audit, you can also take a sampling. You can, based on their HACCP system. So for example, if it's a supplier of a food ingredient, a critical one, you would expect that they will have a HACCP system in place. So as part of their HACCP system, you would like to see who are the people on this HACCP team, who is leading the HACCP team, what kind of training do they have, what kind of competency do they have, who is supporting them? Is it a multidisciplinary team? Depending on the size of the company, if it's a big one, they may have the luxury of having different people. So you have someone for engineering or maintenance, somebody for food safety, somebody for laboratory, logistics, and so on. In smaller companies, you may have one or two people performing all these functions. Then it's even more critical to look into what kind of training do they have, or experience as well. It's not only training, it's also experience. You can also use the experience that they've had in the food industry to evaluate them. There are certain roles where it doesn't matter what kind of training you have. For example, well, not that it doesn't matter, but it matters less. For example, if you have a quality food safety manager, it's very important that they understand the principles of food safety. For example, they understand HACCP, either they've worked with it or they have the training. Whereas if you have general management, then they don't really even need to know about the business. They just need to know how to manage people and how to get the best out of them. So it depends on the roles that they fit. Certain trainings or knowledge or experience is key. Jacob, anything to add?
Okay.
No, I mean, I think that you exhausted it well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, okay. Thank you. And we'd like to break for not necessarily break, but break for questions. Yeah, question time for a few minutes. Yeah, so okay. I see some questions in the chat, and I'd like to take the first one. Okay, so the first one from writers. I guess a stable system. Okay, I think there's a contribution. I guess a stable system is so because of stable connections. Every component of a stable system is connected. So a change in one component may necessarily affect the stability or the whole system, which may translate into the overall output, be it a product or service. Do we have any comments on that?
I think that is spot on.
It's a contribution.
Yeah, in the video that Jacob shared in the beginning, you could see that by moving specific components, whether at the top, the middle, or the bottom, you could cause some instability. And then also the examples that we shared. If you make some changes without communicating it properly, or even, I think, Jacob, you also shared again another good example where all the lines are synced. So you have different equipment in a process line and they are all synced. If one equipment takes 2 seconds to deliver the can to the next process and so on, and you make a change and it doesn't flow, you may end up with the wrong thing in the can because it arrived too late or too early. So I agree with this comment.
Okay, thank you, Jemila. Okay, so the next question is, what is the role of a research and innovation or R&D unit or department in managing change or its effects on a stable system?
Well,
The role of R&D.
Yes, I mean, for R&D, usually they are the initiators of change or in the process, or I would say that maybe sometimes the initiators are the market, okay, the commercial entities that are coming back to say, oh yeah, I mean, our customer says that there is a nice product and they want you to match that product, right? And then R&D, of course, in the lab, these are brains that are very active and very creative, and they would like then, okay, to respond to that. Now, it will mean that R&D will be tweaking things. Okay, it means that put a little bit more of this ingredient, change this ingredient a bit more, increase the concentration. All these things I'm talking about, increase, reduce, change the concentration, they are all changes. They all then become changes. And like some of the examples we have given, these changes could have far-reaching implications than anybody could imagine. So for R&D, it means that R&D would really have to understand the concept of change management. R&D would need to understand that every single change they make, they need to ask themselves the right questions for risk assessment. The R&D would need to make sure that they are identifying the relevant stakeholders in the process, because sometimes the R&D lab is even not on site, so they do not understand what happens in the cooker or in the steamer or in the mixer. They've just designed the product, so they would need to understand in detail what happens in the product. And therefore, if I am going to change a certain dosing concentration, what will it mean for the process? So R&D will have to look at the big picture to make sure that whatever changes are being proposed or being introduced into the process, they understand the implication correctly, or they have the people who will be able to contribute and understand the implications so that we maintain the system in a stable state.
Yeah, and just to add a bit to that, Jacob, so even when they do these formulations, for example, in a pilot lab, so it may work perfectly in a pilot lab is a small scale, replication of the line. But then they need to also take into account what scaling it up would mean, like means putting it on the actual line. So they would really need to size up the equipment to see whether it can still deliver the same quality as they had in the pilot lab. So very important role for R&D.
Okay. Thank you, Gina. The next question is, what role does leadership play in driving successful change management in manufacturing?
Jimmy, you can go for that.
Okay.
Take Jemila.
I think a big impact. So I think if you're on the shop floor, you may be used to saying, what do they do? They don't do anything. We are the ones doing the actual work. They just come, have a look, take big fat salaries and go away. But actually, all change starts from the management. It's the management commitment is very, very important. That is what will determine whether the organization will have good systems in place to be able to follow through this change management. If you have management that does not understand um, the importance, they may understand the importance of the change on the financials, for example, but the implications, the practicalities, the technicalities of actually getting that change through, if they are not on board, then they could maybe try to hurry up the process or take shortcuts, and that will not help. You have a good, nice plan as a quality coordinator or quality manager, but if the management does not believe in what you're trying to achieve, they will not provide the resources, or they may provide you with resources that are not trained, that are not competent, that cannot help you to achieve that, or they will not have the patience for you to go through your supplier approval programs, which may take some time. If, for example, you need to perform audits, you need time. The supplier needs to be ready for you, and you need to have auditor available. That could mean time. So if they want to already participate in a fair, they want to launch the product in a fair which is happening in a month, and you need 3 months to get things moving, you really need that top management commitment to support you, either to put extra resources on it to get it done quickly, or to delay the launch of the product, for example. So top management is important because they provide the resources as well.
Okay, thank you so much. There's another question, which I think I'll direct to Jemila. What are some effective ways procurement teams can conduct supplier assessments and appraisals in collaboration with the quality team, especially to ensure due diligence with materials supplied by new suppliers? And
Okay.
Okay, it looks like we are losing
We are
Jemima.
losing. Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's a slow motion question, but okay.
Can you all still hear us? Okay.
Okay. So
So
there is
we
a
are
thumbs
losing
up. So it
Jemima.
looks
Yeah.
like yes, we can. Okay.
Yeah. Let
Okay.
me see. Can I see the question?
Yes. So the question says, what are some effective ways procurement teams can conduct supplier assessments and appraisals in collaboration with the quality team, especially to ensure due diligence with materials supplied by new suppliers? There seems to be a disjoint between these functions due to differences in interest. Example, one is looking at cost, but the other is looking at compliance and quality. What can be done for SMEs and startups who probably don't have these systems in place and so are unable to meet certain international standards? Quite a big question. Yes.
That's a loaded one indeed. I think I'll start from top management. This is where top management comes in. So indeed, sometimes it may seem that they have different KPIs. The procurement is looking for cost effectiveness. Quality, of course, is looking at the non-negotiables. So how do we get these two to meet? So that's where you need your top management to make sure that you have those shared KPIs. You need to have shared KPIs between procurement and quality. So some of them could be, for example, in the end, if you don't have good products or your process is not good and it's affected by your raw materials, you could have blocked stocks. So, for example, you could make sure that this is a shared KPI, that whatever stocks you get from the supplier, you are able to use. What is the point of buying cheap goods, bring it into the site and then block it, or use it to make products and then block it? It means that you are still holding capital. So, I would say the first thing is to have shared KPIs between quality and procurement. The second thing I think will be to have a certain minimum set of standards, set up such that, and again, top management is important. If you have said, define as a quality that all your suppliers need to have GFSI certification, or they need to have a copy of the specifications that you want to buy, and that they need to be able to comply, which means that you provide this specification to procurement. So before whoever they talk to, before they even look at the price, they need to ask them already. So it's not you quality asking, it's directly procurement checking with the supplier. Are you able to meet these requirements A, B, C? And if the answer is yes, only then do they go ahead and look at the price and so on. So again, it comes to the top management. Procurement needs to understand that these quality requirements are not for quality, but it's in the interest of the business to implement. So I think those are some of the examples I could give. Jake, anything more to add there?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that maybe the second part is the SMEs,
Yeah.
where we're talking about this, and maybe people are hearing us talk about big corporations or big processes, but the smaller you are, even the less cushion you have for error, right? I mean, it means
That's
that if
right.
something goes wrong in your system, it means that it could really impact you. So, but then of course, you still need to implement changes. So these things we are talking about are applicable to everything. And I mean, at the recap, I show one slide, and then maybe I show you the sum of the steps. But it applies to even if you're running a home and you need to change a house help. I mean, you need to basically try to make it as simple as possible. You need to have a system, but make the system as simple as possible and non-bureaucratic as possible, so that it does not overwhelm people. Because when it's the people start feeling overwhelmed, and it's like a lot of times we see an opportunity and we want to make the change, then comes the quality manager or the compliance manager to say, no, 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 wait, now we need to go for a meeting, we need to come and sit down, and then it becomes a problem, right? Because then people
Bureaucratic.
start seeing that system as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is where we say, for the SMEs and for whatever operation you are involved in, make it as simple as possible. Don't make it bureaucratic. And maybe one of the ways to do it is to make sure that you have competent people who can do these things very quickly and very seamlessly, very fluidly, so that it's sweet, it's nice, okay, how it is done, but you are still compliant. Okay, so this is what I would say. And of course, if the SMEs do not have anybody internally to be able to do this, I think that they could, just like HACCP, you could even ask for the help of an external entity or somebody externally who could guide people from the beginning to start implementing. And with time, you could also start building the competencies internally to be able to do it.
Okay. I'm so sorry I went
Yes.
off for a bit. Um,
Good to have
and
you back.
thanks, Jake, for holding the fort in my absence. Okay, so okay, there's a last question here, and it says, what are some of the challenges faced when implementing a major change in the food manufacturing industry, and how can we overcome it?
Well, I
I'm
mean,
sure we've mentioned
yeah,
bits, but if we could just summarize
absolutely.
for her.
I think that really what really comes to mind again is the bureaucracy. I have seen several times people just don't want to do it because it's like, oh, come on. Do we really need to do all of this? And sometimes it's because people see that the change is so insignificant, and it's like, seriously, do we have to go through all of that, right? But I have seen in the industry a situation where a manufacturing site decided to change the supplier, not even the supplier, it was the site. So this is a supplier of cans, right? The supplier supplies cans, and the supplier has factories in different countries, okay, different regions of the world. And then they decided that, look, because of logistic issues during the COVID time, we want to bring the supply of the cans closer to the manufacturing site. So they changed the manufacturing site for the cans. And there was a difference of 0.2 millimeters. Imagine 0.2 millimeters in the height of the can, 0.2 millimeters. it does not sound like anything. 0.2 millimeters is very small, right? However, it ended up, or it resulted in recalling of products because the seaming was impacted, for which reason products were leaking on the market, 0.2 millimeters. So no matter how insignificant the change might seem, please don't underestimate it. But then also to make sure that people can comply and people are willing to follow, please make the process as non-bureaucratic as possible. Make it friendly so that people will be willing to implement the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think just to add on,
Okay.
some of the impacts could also be
Thank you so much.
Loss in customer or consumer trust. So if your consumers lose trust, then your sales is going to go down, and that can kill your business. So again, or on the other side, not understanding the customer requirements enough. So some changes may be implemented because of the experience or desires of one person within, especially these SMEs, whereas the markets may want something else. So market research is also important to support some of these changes if it's necessary at all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jemila. We are still on collaboration. Could you describe how a good collaboration between engineering, production, and the quality and food safety team should be during these major equipment or process changes? And then if you could add that of HR as well.
Very important. HR should not go to the concert with the managing director. Okay, that's just a joke. I think I will start, Jake, and then you can also support.
Yeah.
We already talked about procurement and quality, right? But also important is, for example, engineering and quality. Because again, in the processing line, from my experience, quality wants to inspect to a fault, right? They want everything perfect, whereas engineering wants to go downtime. So they don't want to wait enough to go through a change, and then may take shortcuts. Or for example, if you have cleaning program set up to make sure that your hygiene quality of the line is maintained, and then engineering may come and say, oh, but we cleaned last week, it doesn't look dirty, it's okay, we haven't produced that much volume. So long as you have defined that every week you must stop the line to clean, if you want to change it and base it on volumes, that every week we will clean if we've made 100 tons on it, then this must be backed by a risk assessment, right? So there you would have to do a lot of collaboration, internal collaboration, to make sure that engineering understands why you want to make such a change, or that you understand what their driver is for requesting that change. HR is very important because they recruit, right? And they also help to motivate the staff. So it's very important. If you have staff who are not well trained, this can be a demotivator, because if you come to work and it's very difficult for you to do your work, to follow procedures because you don't understand them, because you're not given time, the onboarding process is not thorough enough. You recruit somebody and immediately you want him to hit the ground running without even explaining, giving them even a tour of the plant to understand the layout of the plant, to understand what the job that they will be doing will impact on the next person or the next internal customer, then that could also lead to problems. So HR is very important, defining good onboarding programs, keeping the staff motivated and well trained. There are certain trainings that you may want to do annually or at onboarding or at every change. For example, the HACCP training is very important. The allergen training, allergen status of the line, of the plant. You need to be able to explain to people, if your site, for example, is a nut-free site, it's very important to train them to put in your policies that people cannot bring peanuts from home into the site to eat in the canteen if your entire site is nut-free. So those collaborations are important. I think communication is key we need to talk to one another, especially in small, sites. It's very important to keep close. If even your KPIs are different, in the end, the objective of the whole plant is to produce good, safe products that they can sell to make a profit for the business, and then people can be paid, etc., etc. When the business makes a profit, people get their pay, and then everybody is happy. So communicating, you cannot communicate enough. It's important to talk to one another and disperse those silos where everybody's looking at only their portion of the business. Jake, more to add?
Yes, Joanna, if you would allow me, I think that,
Okay.
of course, since our time is really, we can see that we are really running out of time now. I think that some of the answers to some of the questions, I will be able to find it on this, I would say, recap slide that we have prepared. Okay. Basically, this is just to show. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes, we
basically
can.
these are like guiding steps. So I'm sure that somebody might be on this forum and might be thinking, okay, so how do I do it? I mean, all these things we are talking about, how do I do it? This is just guidance. Okay, so just make sure that your system is following these steps. And most of the things we've talked about them. First of all, you need to identify or you need to define your change to be made, the change to be made. Please don't forget that you are not supposed to make the change before you come to everybody to come and say that, oh, I made this change. And because of that, okay, can you control it for me? In industry, we see this a lot. It also means then that you need to understand your change very well. You are defining it. Is it an elimination? Are you adding something? Are you modifying something? Are you replacing something? Where is the change going to happen? When is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? Okay. Then you need to identify your stakeholders. This change that is going to be made, who are the stakeholders who are supposed to be informed, who are supposed to make inputs into the change that is going to be made? Is it quality assurance, HR, health and safety, environment, procurement, R&D, engineering? We've talked about all of these guys. Okay. After that, I put this here because I believe this is a very pivotal part of the change management. Identifying the risks and conducting a risk assessment. All of these stakeholders, then I will be able to tell you, okay, so if you are going to make this change, HR will say, then maybe we need to have a training program to make sure that the guys who are going to operate this new machine have been properly trained. And even we are supposed to have a training plan to make sure that every year or every 6 months, we can follow up the training. That might be HR. Engineering might say that, okay, I mean, this is going to reduce the space in the production place. And because of that health and safety, can you do an assessment to be sure that this is okay, right? And then after that, based on these risk assessments, all of these guys are going to be able to tell you go or no go. Are we going to make the change or not? Based on the risks, maybe they are too much, right? But then if there is a goal, we have to establish actions for the goal. Health and safety, are you going to do new trainings? HR, are we going to do new trainings? Okay. Then, based on the actions, what are the identified new controls arising from the proposed changes? You need to identify this. Then you need to implement the changes as defined. Remember that from the beginning, you identified or you defined the change that was going to be made. When you are implementing the change has to be exactly as defined because it is based on that you did the risk assessment. If during the implementation there is a change versus what was defined, then maybe you might have to go back, do the definition, and redo the risk assessment. Okay. Then, of course, test run. Jamie mentioned the upscaling from the R&D lab to the production environment. You don't just go with both legs, I mean, or your head straight into it, because during the run, you might identify new things that people did not imagine or even see. Okay, so you test one, identify additional controls. Then after that, you can close out basically all the actions you have identified, sign off the change documentation. Please retain the document. Retain the document. We talked about traceability, because sometimes things will happen in the process, and suddenly you see that you have a problem, a quality problem in your product since 2 months ago. And then we start asking the question, what happened 2 months ago? If you have documentation, you then will be able to say, yeah, 2 months ago, we changed somebody on the production line. And this might be able to tell you that that problem could be related to that person. Maybe we have to train the person more, or we have to do medicals for the person, or whatever it is. So, and then remember that we said, avoid bureaucracies, please. Ensure competencies in your process. Document. Okay. It doesn't hurt to have documents, except when you don't want the auditors to see, but please make sure that you're documenting your changes. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheikh. I think we are getting ready to bring the session to a close. I'd like to take the opportunity to let us all know that there's a link that has been posted in the chat. Yes, and we would appreciate it if you could give us feedback on this session. Yes, what you liked, what you disliked, and then any suggestions you'd like to make to us. Yes, and also to let you know that you can contact Oba Consult on engage@obaconsult.com. Engage@obaconsult.com. If you'd want any training session or any topic you'd want us to discuss through a forum or training, we would like to know, and then we'll address that. Okay, so as we bring this session to a close, we would like to discuss in both of your working experiences, have you experienced any change that failed, massively? And then if you could also discuss the corrective actions that were taken, and then other changes that were implemented successfully for our learning. This is directed to both of you. Maybe one of you could take the positive and then the other the negative. Thank you.
Jimmy, you want to go?
Yes, I could.
How about the negatives? I have a lot, because usually that's where you have the impacts, right?
Yeah, I was trying to think about the positive,
Right.
positive change. Yeah, I could think of one linked to chocolate, where a whole new kind of chocolate was discovered accidentally. Yeah, just because of a change. So you may have heard of ruby chocolate. So ruby chocolate is the fourth kind of chocolate. You normally have milk chocolate, which we all know is cocoa, and then you have some milk. Then you have dark chocolate, which is mainly cocoa, liquor. There's no milk in there. Then you have white chocolate, which is purely cocoa butter with milk powder. And then the fourth kind of chocolate is ruby chocolate. It's pink in nature. So that pink nature of the chocolate is not from colors or additives. It's from a different kind of processing that arrived because there was a change in how the bean was how do you call it, fermented. uh, so typically we are in Ghana. So Ghana is I think the second largest producer of cocoa. So you harvest it, you spread it in the farm, it's fermented and then dried, and then it goes onto a plant where you can grind it, roast it, grind it, etc. So in this case, in the fermentation process, there was a change that happened, and this accidentally led to the discovery of this kind of beans, which then is used to produce ruby chocolate. So that's a positive change. So of course, once that was discovered, there was a lot of research that went into it. There was a lot of piloting, market research, and in the end, they launched it out. I think it was quite successful in Asia as a new type of chocolate. So just by the way.
Okay. I mean, in terms of, I'll go thermal process again, and I'm sure that by now people on the forum realizes that I love thermal process because, of course, this is what make your canned products, shelf-stable products safe. I mean, microbiologically safe, and I work a lot in this area. We work with a company that was producing canned fish, and then they were putting chili powder, or no, let's say chili into the product. And usually the chili, they were receiving the chili hydrated form. Okay, the chili was hydrated. Then again, somebody came up with a brilliant idea of putting dry chili into the can. Now, in this can, they were filling fish, chili, and then oil. If from your kitchen or whatever it is, you would remember, if you have dry chili or dry spices and you pour oil on it, a lot of times it doesn't soak it, it doesn't hydrate it. Sometimes you have bubbles or you have pockets of air that is trapped in the chili. In thermal process, one enemy is trapped air in the can. So then what happened was that some of the chilies were trapping air in themselves during the thermal process, and because of that, the microorganisms were not dying. Okay, the microorganisms were protected by the trapped air. And then in the market, big issues. So those microorganisms then started growing in the can, bloated cans, leaking cans everywhere. And when authorities see something like that, they're going to come at you big time. So of course, the company was in big trouble. They had to recall products. Luckily, nobody died, but definitely it was a very bad example of a change that had to be made, and we didn't do a risk assessment properly. Okay, so it looks like we lost Joanna. So unfortunately, it falls to me to basically sign off. So I think that our time is up, and of course, we'll have to respect it. Unfortunately, we've gone a bit above it. Apologies for it. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. I would have loved to hear a bit more from the audience, but I'm sure that through the link that has been posted in the comment section or in the chat, please go on to it. It's a very short feedback survey. Please put in your feedback there, and definitely we'll make sure that we will be able to respond. Like Joanna mentioned, you can visit the Oba Consult website or the Engage. You can send a message or a mail to the Engage at the obaconsult.com, and then we'll be able to respond, or we'll be able to react to it. On the website, we are hoping that the recording, all of this has been recorded, so we are hoping that we'll be able to put this recording on our website, and therefore you can monitor the website, and then you can access the recording as you want. Okay. Thank you very much, Jimmy. I don't know whether you have any closing remarks before we can draw the curtain on this.
No, I'd just like to thank Oba Consult for having me. I think it was a good topic to launch the technical series. So I look forward to the feedback from everybody on topics that you want to discuss as well, and then we take it up from there. So thank you very much, Jacob.
Thank you very much, everybody. And like we said, please manage your changes. Even if it's in your kitchen, manage that change. It's important. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And enjoy the weekend, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.